What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Moving on to Japan versus France. So France makes a bunch of huge plays late. Japan keeps it close. And Evan Fournier hits a really tough step back three at the top of the key. Got great separation, great lift, great arc. Just came perfectly through the net, tied the game. Matthew Strazel had a 4-point play on the left wing. It was a call I didn't necessarily agree with because the hand was kind of like on the hip. Yuki Kawamura, the guard from Japan, did a wonderful job in this particular game orchestrating offense, especially after Rui Hachimura got ejected. But I thought he got tail end of a really tough call there on that left wing. Again, by the book, technically hand on the hip. It's like by the book, it's a foul. But there's a huge difference between having the hand on the hip and pushing on the hip. And like that's one of those like incidental contact things that I think needs to be let go, especially in such a big moment. And again, like if France beats you because he makes that shot and then you foul and he makes 1 out of 2 free throws and then he goes down to the other end and they hit another 3 and they win, fine, tip the cap, congrats to France, they beat you. That's really tough to be up 4 points like that in that situation and to lose on a call like that was not a fan. But Victor Wembanyama took over in overtime. There was a little post up on the right block. I can't remember exactly who was guarding him, but they tried to front the post. And when they fronted the post, Wemby just immediately spun off of it. Pass was perfect to the high point. On the catch, he had his back turned to the basket. He spun again and went right up and laid it up and the foul. A super, super coordinated play. Really, really impressive stuff. Really impressive stuff there from Victor Wembanyama. And then he missed a 3 on the right wing, but an offensive rebound. He got another clean look from the top of the key, knocked it down. Big time play from Victor Wembanyama. The guard play from France is really where the issue is. It's like when you look at Canada and France in particular, Canada has this incredible perimeter core, but their front line is just too small to really contend with some of the bigger front lines here in FIBA. And then you go and you look at France, and they have this incredible front line. I mean, even Guerschon Yabusele had an incredible game in this one, hit a bunch of like, tough mid-range jump shots, was competing, was flying around. And they have that front court presence, but they like Evan Fournier and Frank Ntilikina, it's not enough. In terms of shot creation. Matthew Strazel had a little stretch there in the second half where he was spamming ball screens with Gobert and coming off clean on the right wing and getting some decent looks, and he hit a couple of pull-up jump shots there, but they just struggle in terms of that guard play. Victor Wembanyama, one of the most impressive things that I notice about France in the 2 games is they're running a lot of like kind of weird, funky, like big man ball screens. Well, where they will have like Wemby at the elbow. Like imagine like the left elbow, so like where the free throw line extended kind of out to where the edge of the key is, and he'll catch there, and then Gobert will come out of a triple, like Wemby will be in a triple threat, and Gobert will come and set a screen, but what he'll do is he'll deliberately screen the backside of the defender, and what they're trying to do there is most teams are going to switch a 4-5 pick and roll. What that means is the power forward and the center in a 2-man game together. The reason why they're going to switch that is because likely those 2 defenders are similar in size. And if those 2 defenders are similar in size, rather than allowing Wemby to come off clean as the guy's in trail position, in which case now Wemby's just going to go right to the rim. If you just switch it, it effectively like shuts the action down, right? But this is where high-low basketball comes into play. High-low basketball is when you have one of your big guys operating around the foul line while another one of your big guys is underneath the basket trying to obtain good post position because that center can throw good over-the-top passes from that foul line area. So what they were doing, which I thought was really smart, and they did this with Gobert, but they also did it with Yabusele and some of their other bench forwards as well. But they would have Wemby start with the ball, and as Gobert would screen, he would deliberately screen the backside of the defender. And the reason why that's important is then as Wemby comes off into the switch, when he comes off into the switch, the screener's defender is now on Wemby squared up. But Gobert now has inside position. He has inside position because he screened that backside. Then he can quick turn and seal and Wemby can throw that over the top pass, and there's an automatic angle kind of baked into the set because of the screening angle you take on the backside there. They got a bunch of good stuff out of that. I thought Wemby passed out of it extremely well. And so far through 2 Olympic games, Victor Wembanyama 1.17 points per shot on jump shots, which is really impressive. So great start to the Olympics for Wemby. On the Japan side of things, really was impressed by the overall ball and player movement. Some beautiful stuff in 5 out, really smart cutting. Guys like I cut a couple examples in my film session today and put them on my Twitter feed at _ Jason LT. But remember when I talked about in the show on Monday, the concept of like off-ball cutting specifically out of the wing, and how that can, when you're running a ball screen on one side, how a cut on the weak side can cause confusion for off-ball defenders that are trying to sink into the paint, and it's hard to track man and ball in those situations. They got good looks out of that. Their guards were quick to come off of multiple actions. There was ball reversal. The ball was popping around. They'd have Rui as like their kind of go-to like on an island scorer when they needed him. But everything else was really smart 5-out ball and player movement. And that blender did a lot of damage to a French team that's got really good defenders between Frank Ntilikina and Nick Batum and Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert. This is a very long and athletic defensive team that Japan was getting a lot of really good shots against. And it's just a wonderful example of the concepts that I talk about a lot on this show, in the sense that you can generate offense with ball and player movement and good schematic approach to help bolster personnel limitations. Rui Hachimura, really impressive offensive game. The face-up stuff, the footwork in the post, he was going right around good defenders and getting into the lane and finishing in traffic. The jump shot looks great. He's elevating. He's getting great rotation on it. He's knocking it down. The one thing, and I put a little thread of about 5 clips together you can find on my Twitter feed, but Rui is really struggling on defense with Japan, specifically off the ball tracking shooters. And remember, this was the specific issue that he ran into in the playoffs against Denver when he was tracking Michael Porter Jr. He had a couple of massive mistakes on that end, including one in Game 5 that might have cost them the game, where in a semi-transition set, he just wasn't paying attention and he lost Michael Porter Jr. for 3. Huge moment that the Lakers had a chance to send that thing back to LA for Game 6. And Rui's just attention to detail in those situations just has to get better. It's tracking through screens. It's the relaxation as soon as his man gives up the ball. He gave up 2 threes to Evan Fournier, where he got switched onto Fournier. But then as soon as Fournier gave up the basketball, Fournier just cut to a different spot on the 3-point line, and Rui wasn't paying attention, and Fournier got clean looks from 3. And so in order for Rui to be the type of player that the Lakers need him to be, those are things that he has to sharpen up. Shout out to Yui Kawamura, the quickness and pull-up shooting he showed, especially to try to close out that game after Rui Hachimura got ejected on that second unsportsmanlike foul on Rudy Gobert. I had so much fun watching him in this game. He was an absolute warrior, kept his team in it. I think he had like 28, 29 points. Super, super fun game. And then one last guy I wanted to shout out, Hugh Watanabe. I'm assuming related to Yuta Watanabe. But he had 2 huge blocks, including this one in regulation where he came down from the left wing when Rudy Gobert had a deep catch. And Rudy Gobert loaded up for his like 2-hand slam, and he comes flying in and just barely gets a piece of it at the end. Ends up being a huge play that gave Japan a really good chance to win this game. And it's such a great example of what I talked about after Kevin Durant got dunked on by Anthony Edwards, which is, guys, getting dunked on is a sign of being a great defender. That's something that you have to, that's a commitment that you have to make. You have to be willing to risk what could happen if you get dunked on in order to bring that next level of rim protection. Had another big weak side block in the overtime period as well. But alas, Victor Wembanyama made the 2 big plays in OT, and they got out of there. All right, let's move on to Canada, Australia real quick before we get out of here. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander picked up 2 quick early fouls, and there's only 5 fouls in FIBA, so he had to sit for a little bit. That allowed Australia to take a little bit of an early advantage. But in the early 4th quarter, Canada ends up pulling away. Dylan Brooks made a couple of plays, a little triple threat ball screen out of the right corner, where I believe I can't can't remember who it was, the big man for Canada. I'm blanking on his name now. But he slipped the ball screen. Dylan hit him perfect. He got a layup. And then he hit a little mid-range jump shot. And then right after that, Jamal Murray made a couple of plays. A nice little closeout attack to get RJ Barrett a wide open three in the corner. And then kind of like one of those classic Jamal Murray ISO pull-up jump shots around the foul line. All of a sudden like that, Canada was up by 11 and the game was over. I wanted to talk a little bit about the shot creation data for Shai, Jamal, and then Josh Giddey. So Shai has been brilliant so far in Olympics play. He's run 25 ISOs for 36 points, including passes. That's 1.44 points per possession. And he's personally, on his own shot attempts out of ISO, shooting 7 for 12. So Shai's locked in, looks fantastic. 41 total ISOs, post-ups, and ball screens in Olympic play for 56 points. That's 1.37 points per possession. Really impressive stuff from Shai. Jamal Murray made some big plays in this particular game like we talked about earlier, but shooting just 2 for 10 on jump shots so far in Olympic play. And I'm wondering if he's still a little banged up. I was talking to some of my Nuggets guys, and the word on him is that he's just not in shape. And if that's the thing, if Jamal's just not in shape, that's kind of disappointing because that's becoming kind of a reputation for him, that he's showing up into season and playing his way into shape. And like one of the things is like that sort of thing can lead to injuries when you're trying to play your way into shape, when you're playing with more weight, when you're playing super intense games, when your body's not prepared for it. So that obviously was a little bit concerning. Josh Giddey, though, really impressive so far for Australia. 34 pick and rolls, ISOs, and post-ups for 39 points. That's 1.15 points per possession. He's big. He's handling the basketball well. He's really good at protecting the basketball, really good with like behind the back dribbles and then using his shoulders to protect. He can make all the reads. Deadly with his floater. He's 5 for 7 so far in the Olympics on floaters. That's 71%. And then what he'll do a lot of times in switches when he sees a small guard in front of him, he'll just hit a hard dribble move like into their chest and then just gather right around 10 feet and rise up over the top of him and go to his little floater. Canada was doing some switching against him in this game, and he ended up beating it with a step back three as well as a driving floater against Jamal Murray. Really impressive shot making from Josh Giddey. I'm curious to see how it translates to the NBA level in a bigger role with Chicago next year. Last thing before we get out of here, is Canada a threat? Like I mentioned earlier, as good as they are on the perimeter, they're just not big enough on the inside. And one of the specific changes with FIBA that's been a challenge for USA is the defensive 3-second rule, and the idea that you can park a center underneath the basket and kind of gum things up and force them to rely on perimeter jump shooting, where USA can go cold sometimes, although I think Kevin Durant fixes that problem. With that being the case, Canada just doesn't have the interior size, even if they do park guys under the basket, to bother the bigger American athletes as they're going downhill. And so as good as Canada is on the perimeter, I just don't think they're big enough underneath the basket to make any sort of real problem for USA.